you get your OTA for production and you're so excited and you just want to like stick it in everyone's face and be like, give me my production, I can do it. And then you get to a contract shop and they're like, I don't know how to do that. Or the big one, I don't know how to do Silver Phase 3s. We don't do that here, which is crazy, but don't be wed to it. Meet your customer where they are, right? So you show up, you say, here's my awesome offering, and here's all the ways you can get my awesome offering, and we would love for you to use this way of getting to us. But here's options C through F, and we're good with whatever you want to do.
This is All Quiet on the Second Front, a podcast where boring conversations around defense tech and national security come to die. Join me, Tyler Sweatt, and my Second Front comrades as we dismantle the mundane, cut through the bureaucratic BS to demystify the world of defense tech. But be warned, this is not a typical government podcast. Ready to get weird? What's up, everybody? I'm your host, Tyler Sweatt. Welcome to another episode of All Quiet on the Second Front, the podcast where boring defense talk comes to die. Super excited today. We're going to dig into the, I think, oft frustrating contracting side of the house and really start to hopefully demystify some stuff around acquisitions. So we've got Jonathan Mostowski, probably, I think, my go-to historically for every contracting question I've ever had. So thanks for swinging by, brother.
Yeah, man, my pleasure. Super excited to be here. I love the show. So really stoked to have my chance to come on and hang out with you for a bit. Just give like a little bit of intro.
Yeah, I was going to say, tell them who you are, brother.
All right, sure. So Jonathan Mostowski, I've been a contracting officer in acquisitions for the last 2 decades. Started at NGA. Did that for about 13 years, back before Agile or SAFE or any of that stuff was ever talked about in the federal government. I was running all the software development contracts at the time, and that's when our director decided we were going to be a SAFE agency. So I had to figure it out. And I went out and I just talked to a lot of people in industry, experimented, and ended up developing a couple of models that didn't exist in the federal government around how to procure modern IT and software development services. And they kind of took off. Yeah. So from there,
started a revolution, if you will.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, a little something. Kind of woke some people up.
Yep.
And so that got me talking to some different folks. I ended up co-authoring the TechFAR handbook, which was OFPP's first guide on how to do this kind of modular acquisitions. And then shortly after, was recruited over to U.S. Digital Service in the early days. Spent 4.5 really cool years there working Fed Civ, as well as going over to Defense Digital Service and doing DoD, which DoD and national security is the space I love to work in.
Yep.
So that was super cool. Out of the Pentagon, worked with legislators, helped write some regulations, policies, bunch of acquisition strategies, and then left to go do a tech startup. Did that for 4 years, got a lot of really great industry experience. All along, I kind of had this consulting gig on the side, so I was starting to see, how are these ideas I'm having inside the government affecting companies outside the government.
Yep.
Was really able to kind of pull that together in those 4 years at the startup, and then I went out and now I'm doing my own consulting company, working both with government agencies and companies. Yep. Again, trying to just bridge that gap and getting the right companies in front of the right agencies to do good work.
Yeah, and take the opportunity to get a little product placement for the first time on the show. Book just came out. Super excited. Actually geeked to have a signed copy here. Pop the hood on this just a little bit so folks know. I know everyone's seen it kind of flying around LinkedIn and stuff, but give folks what it is.
Yeah, I mean, what this is basically it's culture change in the federal government through the eyes or experiences of modernizing acquisitions, right? Because bureaucracy and government procurement is about as thick as it gets. And so if we can make innovation there, we can make it anywhere. And so that's kind of the idea for the book. I think it's written for everybody. I try to write it at a level that you don't have to be a total contracting nerd to understand it. You don't have to be a total, I've never seen contracts before to get stuff out of it. It really covers kind of the waterfront and hopefully at a level that's digestible. And really it boils down to what I consider kind of like my 3 principles of innovation, which is a belief that anything can or should be done differently, a deep understanding of the rules and regulations that govern the thing you want to change, and responsible risk-taking.
Yeah.
So the book kind of follows that flow.
So taking sort of that approach to innovation and thinking about, hey, things can, should, will change, and that sort of change continuum as as a factor, as a principle. When you look at, we'll start on the sort of commercial side of the table. When you look at commercial companies that are coming in, trying to work with the government, trying to figure out what that looks like, where are you seeing, folks making a ton of progress now and having success, but I think probably more interesting is, hey, where are you seeing sort of like buckets of the same type of challenges where folks are either getting stuck in maybe a misperception or they don't understand certain lingo or a procedural sort of snafu?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that could be a whole conversation. That's a lot to unpack.
That's a thesis right there.
Yeah. I mean, kind of the trend we're seeing right now is everybody's like cyber crazy.
Yeah.
Everybody was OTA crazy for a little while. Now it's cyber crazy. And for good reason. There's lots of reasons why cybers are good. It's a great way to kind of get into the government when you don't have a lot of experience. The biggest thing is it gives you that direct award sole source preference, not just authority, but preference into perpetuity. So there's like a really good reason to go after cybers and get that first one, if nothing else. I think that's a good idea. In fact, most of my clients, companies I've worked for, I've always kind of said, hey, that's part of step one is like we need to track that down. I think where people go wrong with it is they get addicted to it.
Yeah.
Cyber business is not really sustainable. There's some companies that are cyber factories. Kind of leave those out of the conversation. That's a different animal.
Yep.
But generally speaking, if you're like, I'm a service company or a product company and I'm trying to get my foot really into the government, get your cyber, but then don't live off it, right?
Yep.
It's not a lot of money. It's a very slow process. It's time consuming to get through. And once you have it, you don't really need a bunch of them, right?
Yeah.
And not only is it not super sustainable for companies, it's not really sustainable for these software factories or these agencies that are like living off all their businesses going through cybers, because that money is not really dependable and the cyber program is always kind of under a microscope. So I think it's a great system right now, but I think we need to start looking a little bit further beyond and say like, what comes next? And I would say like OTA seemed like that was what it is. And then sort of the same sort of, kind of brakes started getting pumped on it. So I really think we need a separate authority, kind of looks and smells like OTA, but it's just around innovation, software development, and getting tech into the government.
That's super interesting. So when you see those sort of commercial companies maybe oscillating around a cyber, because I think they're well marketed by the government, right? I mean, I get that cause and effect. When you then flip that on the other side and talk to the government about, hey, how are you guys thinking about, maybe this thing you've used like an innovation tax for, so it's like not core program dollars.
Right.
How are you thinking about, enduring that, maybe moving that to an O&M or a sustain or institutionalizing it enterprise-wide? I feel like, at least in my experience, everybody gets really excited right until somebody needs to make that decision. And everybody gets quiet really fucking fast. Yeah,
that's when everything's all quiet on the second front, right? This is one of the biggest obstacles in this space and government procurement is, not the valley of death, right?
Yeah.
Like you just can't have this conversation without talking about it, unfortunately. And that's really what I was getting at, is that the cybers will run you as fast as they can right up to that valley of death.
Yep.
And the stakeholders can't really decide they love you and want to invest in you until kind of towards the end.
Yeah.
And so now they're like, great, I'm going to program for this. In 2 years, we should get that money. Come on back. And what is a startup or a small business going to do for 2 years? They're going to go chase another cyber, right? So that's kind of that cycle I was just talking about. So I appreciate the way you articulated it. I really think, all of these, last time I checked, and there's probably more, there was something like 200 and so innovation hubs in the Department of Defense, right? What's the innovation budget in the Department of Defense? And I'm not talking about R&D money, right? That a lot of that goes to R&E, no knock on them, but that's not quite the same thing. That's not taking, programs that are kind of in these little hubs in these software factories and getting them into the hands of the servicemen and women who actually need them, right?
Yeah, where do you see... And I'll leave this unbounded, right? Because I think there's probably some interesting sort of prescriptive guidance that you could give to, a commercial company or, hey, again, not Arnie or A&S, but, call it like, hey, if you told DepSecDef, not necessarily CATH, just any DSD, like what to go do to fix this, that's sort of to your gap. So, hey, we identify a problem statement. We find a cool piece of technology, I think there's a theory out there that in some worlds that SIBR is like someone's actually modifying and making it go. I think in a lot of worlds that software's already built at the expense of private capital. And there's maybe some like user testing and a couple features that are rolling. So it's pretty what I would call traditional kind of deployment and implementation. Mm-hmm. How does each side, or how do people start leaning forward to address that 2-year gap? So if I know, hey, upon success here, it's going to take me 2 to 4 years to palm in, what should I, as a company, be telling my PM or be doing biz dev on the side? Or what as a PM KO should I be doing to, put a UFR in or look for sweeps or whatever it might be?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so here's the big secret, right? Like UFRs are great, right? And here's what you all are doing wrong. You're waiting too late. You're waiting till, June, and you're asking for UFR money. You need to be thinking about that, early in the year, so when that money comes up. But the real secret here is those dollars are there, right? When programs are budgeted in the POM, every dollar isn't accounted for to like it's going to go to this thing. It's going to an effort. But that effort can be broken down into lots of things. And that's where, people who can track the funding, the J-books and where all those lines of funding are going to which program offices, that's why the big businesses do so well. They've got the lobbyists, they've got the people who understand how to read them. They know how to track those dollars and where to get them. And the unfortunate thing is a lot of our customers don't even know. Like the operational requirement owners, like, I don't know where the money is. But there is someone in their organization that does, and there are funds available to do this stuff. They just have to align it to what was ever in the POM, and it certainly does, right? Like they wouldn't be doing this work if it wasn't in that general bucket. You just have to learn how to read that, kind of decipher it.
So it's an understanding of that flow of money from Congress through committee down to agency, down to director, and where that's allocated to, not even a color, but more of like a theme, an operational theme of money that you could then go compete. Sounds like I'm saying something formal, but effectively compete for that. Hey, we can satisfy this programmatic intent by using it here, and you've got to go make your case.
Yeah, and I'd set compete aside, right? Because there's all kinds of ways to get money. Like maybe you did a SIBR and you have that proprietary capability to get that award. That doesn't really matter, right?
Yeah.
Like people always come to me and they're like, "What acquisition strategy should we use?" I'm like, that's easy, right? I could tell you that in 2 seconds. Let's solve all the important stuff first. Who wants it? Where's the money? How are they going to get it to you? Once we get all that, getting on contract is not the hard part. Yeah. And I say that kind of lightly. Like, of course, it's not easy. But
it's complicated. But again, and I mean, not to speak out of turn, but just in my experience, even like if someone called tomorrow and was like, "Hey, we have, $10 and we want to make a software thing go burr." Mm-hmm. Cool. We've got distribution partners. We're in a couple different marketplaces. Exactly. Like we have a SIBR 3, so we've got that capability.
Yeah.
It's kind of putting those building blocks in place. And I think that is an interesting spot to go now is as we talk about demystifying some of this. I think the acquisition strategy in the commercial company side has become this big, the ball rolling down the hill in Indiana Jones where people are like, how are we gonna, and there's some kind of easy ways to buy down acquisition strategy complexity. Like you could go through a Carasoft, you can go through an AWS marketplace. Like, are people overthinking this problem a little bit early, or is it, hey, they're just going maybe a little past what it would be like an MVP of, hey, solve for the transaction. The acquisition strategy is really important if you're trying to like move to a full program of record and make your thing a thing. But if you're trying to deploy into, how do they need to think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's overthinking it or don't know enough to know what to think about, and so they kind of gravitate to the obvious, like, oh, I obviously need a GSA schedule. I tell a lot of my early clients, no, you don't. Yeah. It's a big headache. Like until you're ready for it, it's not worth it. When you're ready for it, 100% worth it.
Yeah.
But what you just said about like I could do this, that's what I describe as the toolbox, right? Yeah. So whenever I'm sitting down with a client, I'm like, let's look at your toolbox. Yours is empty. Okay, what's the first easiest thing we can put in your toolbox? Let's get that in there. Let's get the second thing in there, and save your money on hiring a GSA consultant to get you on a schedule until you have some stabilized offerings, right?
Yeah.
Until you got some repetitive business, because most of the time you're going to be competing on GSA. So if you're not ready for it, why spend the money on the upkeep of GSA?
That's right.
But yeah, there's lots of kind of, I won't call them easy buttons, but they're easy.
Yeah,
buttons,
I mean, they
right?
remove some of that complexity, though, right?
Yeah,
I can go use a distributor to have access to a GSA schedule.
Yeah, and I love that one. Especially for my product clients, I'm always like, let's get you in front of like Carousel and some of our
It's my
other
first recommendation to product companies.
Yep, and that's one that most people overlook. They think they're not ready for it. And I've had good experiences with them where they're like, we'll help you early on in the process and kind of walk you through, because it's in their best interest as well to help you be successful.
Yeah, I've seen a bunch of goodness there. From the other side, let's assume, hey, I'm, software company A, and I've got all these tools. Let's say I've got an OT from Tradewinds. Let's say I've got a Cyber. Let's say I'm in AWS's marketplace and I'm a Carosoft company.
Yep.
I'm talking to the government. Now, if you're advising the government, how familiar is, a government PM or KO with those different tools and what you use? Because I know from our side of the table, a lot of the time it's like, hey, we've made this so easy. Like, it's a streamlined process. You literally like kick a MIPR over, approve us out, and you're there. And then all of a sudden it takes like 9 weeks, and it takes 12 weeks, it takes 16, and you're like, hey, what's going on? So how should people think about educating or increasing the familiarity of their government customers? And then B, for the government folks listening, how do they get smarter on some of that?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a range of capabilities in the government. So, I always approach my engagements with the government, whether I'm representing a company or actually advising the government, as like, hey, let's make it as easy for you as possible, right? So it's not talking down. It's just like, here's a bunch of options ways in which you can get to us. Here's the one we recommend and why. And let the government make the decision. It's their decision. And that's something people really have to understand. Like, you get your OTA for production and you're so excited and you just want to like stick it in everyone's face and be like, give me my production, I can do it. And then you get to a contract shop and they're like, I don't know how to do that. Or the big one, I don't know how to do Cyber Phase 3s. We don't do that here, which is crazy. But, so don't be wed to it. Meet your customer where they are, right? So you show up, you say, here's my awesome offering. And here's all the ways you can get my awesome offering. And we would love for you to use this way of getting to us. But here's options C through F. And we're good with whatever you want to do. And that, it educates them. It gives them a place to go where they're comfortable. Like I think most contracting people are comfortable with Soup and Carosoft. And like, they know how to do that, right? The Cyber Phase 3s, the OTA productions, those kind of things are a little bit more niche. You have to look for the shops that do that. And that's something else to do is like, we spend a lot of time getting to know our program offices. Do you get to know contracting offices? Yeah.
I think that's something I've talked with like Bonnie Evangelista about a bunch too, is I think that sits on both sides, right? Are the performers and the teams who build those relationships with the PMs, the mission owners, are they building that same type of relationship on the procurement side of the house? The answer is more often than not no. Conversely, if you're a mission owner or a program manager out there, are you getting your contracting team out to go sort of meet the world that you want them to operate in? I think we were at an event, I'm going to date myself here, maybe sometime in the last year, right? Time is a flat circle. And Bonnie brought up hey, I always ask people, how much travel funds do you have for your contracting team? And they're like, well, none. She's like, okay, but how do you want them to know what you're talking about if they're not able to, even just at some simple industry events, understand the intent of what's being built, what's being stitched together, what the vision is? And I found that to be, I'd never thought of that before. I'd always thought of to your point, kind of meet them where they are, understand, here's what they're comfortable with, here's what they're not. But how do we increase that comfort or expand that knowledge? And I think that's a huge opportunity for the government.
That is a lot of what that book's about. A contracting officer, their first job is a business advisor. Okay. Everything else, enforcing the regulations, that's the busy work side of contracting. The cool part of contracting is being a business advisor. I learned it early in my career. I was buying RDT&E for NGA, like super sci-fi spy stuff.
Bet.
I didn't know what any of the words meant. I went down to the
Yes, I'll
office
take
of all-
12, please.
Yeah, right. 12 ontologies. I'd like those ontologies to be big. I didn't know what it was, so I went and sat with the scientists. And the great thing is, like, nerds love to talk about the thing they're nerdy about. Like, I will talk about this all day long. I'm nerdy about it. Scientists who buy use ontologies for understanding like spatial awareness, they love to talk about it. I would go down there and I'd be like, dude, what does this mean? And they would just, and I ate it up.
Yep.
And I was like, this is cool. Now I know what I'm buying. So I got excited about my procurement.
Yep.
And I talk a bit about it in the book. It's, it's the difference between being a professional and having a job, right? And there's a lot of people out there whose their job is an 1102. Their job is a core, their job is a program manager, and they just go through the motions. Yeah. And that's kind of the bad rap.
God, half the time the core is an assigned duty. It's not even their job. Yeah. I would give them, that's where I'd give them shit if it was their job and they didn't like, it's their third assigned duty. And some poor public servant is like, shit, I'm not responsible for like sharks with lasers, ontologies?
Yeah.
The fuck is an ontology?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, the professional model is how can I be the best in my field? Yeah. What do I need to study? I should be reading case law. I should be going out to these vendor sessions and getting to understand the technology. I should be going out to the site where the technology is going to be deployed. When you're buying for DoD and national security and you travel to the parts of the world where this stuff's being used, suddenly time matters, right? Like suddenly getting this stuff done and deployed, it's as important to you as it is to the person who's receiving it.
It's funny, right? You bring that one of the, and I don't know how the story ends, I'm going to tell, so I was part of like the beginning of it. This is 15 years ago. We were trying to prototype mobile labs for forensics on post-blast exploitation. So like, how do we know where bomb components came from without having to send bomb fragments all the way back to like a specific analytics center?
Right.
Can we sort of like productize down to a shipping container, hey, we've actually built a full exploitation kit? And can we start to test like particulates and say, hey, like based on this soil or this whatever, this DNA on it, we can tell where it came from.
Yeah.
And, had done everything from like being out at the ranges, blowing up minivans to being up at like an FFRDC with the physical lab concept built out, everything in there. And we had procurement folks, we had finance folks, we had actual, analysts, we had scientists, we had a bunch of operators out there and walked through the whole process on how would like a whole F3 EAD operation look like out in the field and come back in? How would a whole analysis and sort of the intel feedback look like? And then how would we buy, ship, and deliver these? And it was in 1 week, we got through more collaborative problem solving than I probably have ever gotten through in my life in like a joint multi-agency, like different title authorities. Like it was wild.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is like, everybody has their skill sets, your lawyers, your contracting officers, your security folks, your finance people, they are all experts in their field. And together you guys can be so powerful. You can get through what everybody calls bureaucracy. It's like, it's only hard when people aren't motivated to get through it. Yeah. When you're motivated to get through it, you don't even actually have to hack it, right? Like I used to be a bureaucracy hacker. Yeah. You don't really have to hack bureaucracy. You have to understand bureaucracy and use it, right? Yeah. The entire FAR, like 2,631 pages or so, is mostly about how to do stuff, right? It's about getting shit done. It's not about no. That's in fact, the few places where it says no, it's like, and here's how you get an exception to that no. You don't need to hack that. You just need to use
understand it.
And I mean, one of my best contracting experiences, I was in the program office. It was that program I was talking about where we ran, all the application services. But I was in the program. I sat with them. I was in their meetings. Like there was no, I'm over here, you're over here. Like we talked about everything. We did everything. We saw all the products together. And I just, I wanted them to be successful. It was my team too. And like, you don't get that experience when you have a contracting team in Kentucky, a requirement owner in San Francisco, and a user out in the Middle East. Yeah. Like, how do you bring that together? And obviously in the DoD, that's just a reality. Yeah. So what's the other way to bring it together? You got to get that contracting person, for example, and true for all the positions, you got to get that contracting person to understand the mission they're helping.
You build that cross-functional empathy.
Right.
Same way you're going to get sort of it's an organizational trust question.
Yeah.
A lot of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's super interesting. All right, 2 last questions. One is like we've seen a lot of change, maybe some of it hype, but buzzwords. You talked about OTs and SIBRs and new authorities and new organizations. As we're turning the corner, politics aside, but on a new, however it goes, a new administration, potentially new leaders coming in the department and stuff like that. What are you excited about? Like what's hey, this could happen. This would be cool. We'll keep it uplifting.
Yeah. What am I excited about? I'm excited because we're kind of past the point of like, do we need to do this? Right.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's exciting. When I first started doing this stuff, people looked at me like I was crazy. Like I would get up there and talk about it. They're like, what? Yeah. No EVM?
Yeah.
What? Statement of objectives for software? You can't do that. Now people are like, they get it, right?
Yep.
In fact, they've gotten it so much, all they're talking about is AI. They're not even talking about how you're going to deliver it, right? Like, that is a really good thing. What we need to do is kind of fill in under that sand foundation with some cement, right? Because like it's
That's
really
a good way to put that.
Yeah.
That's a great way to put that.
we need to like make sure it's enduring and we actually like get the benefits of it, not just the talking points of it. But I am excited that we're at that stage of it. I think
it's real.
It's real.
Like it's here to stay.
Right.
That rocks.
Yeah.
All right, last question. King for a day.
Oof.
You've got a magic wand. You can make any change you want. You don't have to caveat it, right? So like your intent is just realized.
Okay.
What are you getting after?
The untouchable, appropriation.
Yeah.
I would get rid of expiring funds. I would erase that idea of I'm a government person. I've got my budget. I have to spend it all or else I get less budget next year.
Yep.
And so I'm going to blow it on some stuff at the end of the year so I don't get knocked for it.
Yep.
I would get rid of that construct. Instead, I would encourage my program managers to be thoughtful on how they execute their dollars. And you can save it. Yep. And not only can you save it, it goes into now this is specific, a technology-only innovation fund.
Yep.
It's your pot. It will sit there. It doesn't expire. It's no color money, but it can only be used to do what? Bridge the valley of death.
Yeah.
That is exactly
That's awesome.
what I would do.
All right. Yeah, that's a fucking great idea.
Let's do it.
Yeah. All right, cool. You've got another guy championing for that.
All right,
so
there's 2 of us. So.
Well, and also it brings the right incentives in where we're incentivizing smart procurement, but you're giving a mechanism for kind of where we started, which is how do we get folks to think about traversing the valley? We're now empowering them to do it.
Right.
And this is if you trust a soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, whatever Space Force people are called, Guardian. If you trust them with the money, with the mission, with the weapon system, why wouldn't you trust them with this? Why do you not give them that lever? So I think that's an awesome way to think about further empowering and building on the change we've already put in motion.
Absolutely.
Dude, that rocks. This is awesome. I could do this all fucking day with you.
Yeah.
This is I learned something every time. I am grateful you're still in the fight. You've brought so much good to the community. So thank you for what you've done and what you're still doing, brother.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Heck yeah.
All right.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers.